With your help, we can continue to fight for freedom, reach new audiences, and bring important information to the public free of charge. This is not possible without your generosity. Join our quest for the truth and our freedom and donate today. Simply go to tntradio.live. For the news and views you can't hear anywhere else, it's The Steve Hook Show on today's News Talk, TNT Radio.
All right, welcome to the Steve Hook Show on TNT Radio. I am Steve Hook. Good to be with you again. We've got a big show for you today, and I'm very excited about my guest today, John Vecchione. John Vecchione is well, I'll tell you what John is. He's a civil libertarian, is what he is. He is the lead litigation counsel, senior litigation counsel for the new Civil Liberties Alliance. A job that the ACLU used to do, and now John and his team have taken up the mantle of fighters for American civil liberties. Think individual rights and whatnot. Now, this is because you may recall on July 4th in the states here, we had a district judge, Judge Doughty, told the Biden administration and all federal agencies without exception that, hey, you are no longer allowed to communicate, coerce, or in any way dictate what social media is allowed to post or not post. It is as Doughty called it in his rendering of his decision, he said it's Orwellian, it's reminiscent of Orwell's A Ministry of Truth. Now, it wouldn't shock you, I'm sure, to learn that the Biden administration and the federal government writ large, if we're honest, just lost it over this. How dare you say that we can't suppress people's voices? How dare you try? So they've tried to move this over to they have moved it over to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals in Louisiana, trying to get this injunction removed so they can once again censor people and stop people from finding out what they may want to find out. Think Hunter Biden laptop. Think Russia collusion hoax. Think, I don't know, COVID-19 protocols. This was all stuff that the federal government went out of their way to censor and block Americans and anyone from talking about online. And they did a pretty damn good job of it. Of course, the Twitter files kind of exposed a lot of this, that basically the FBI had cots in the, I'm exaggerating, but for all intents and purposes, that's what it was. They had cots and sleeping arrangements inside the headquarters of Twitter. They were constantly meeting with Twitter. They were saying, pull this, pull that, don't allow this, don't allow that, promote this, deplatform that. And it was blatant and it was obvious. And Judge Doughty said no to it. And so now they've moved it to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals in Louisiana, and we're going to talk to John Vecchione and ask him what he thinks is going to become of all this, because we need to get our civil liberties back, folks. We cannot be dictated to like this and told to just sit down and shut up. So I look forward to chatting with him about it. In other news, I must tell you that they are petrified in the Democrat Party of Biden running for president again. They will publicly say that they support him. He's our guy. But if you've noticed the media lately, they're getting very, very nervous about Biden. And why wouldn't they? If you saw any of the video of King Charles basically kind of having to walk Biden around because he's so dementia-addled that he can't figure out where he's supposed to go. All of this and more is starting to have a drip, drip, drip effect on the powers that be inside the DNC. And if you needed any further proof, you need only look to Jake Tapper at CNN. Jake Tapper at CNN claimed that he would not shy away from reporting on the Hunter Biden laptop. He said, we've always covered it. We'll continue to cover it, which is funny because in 2021, folks that have done this research have looked back and they said, we've looked at all of the programming that Jake Tapper and CNN did over the course of a year, and not one time did they report on the laptop. So Tapper's lying about having reported on it. But just the fact that he's saying we will not shy away, we're going to go there. What does that tell you? Tells me that Gavin Newsom is not in Iowa for a vacation. Gavin Newsom is the stealth candidate that's hanging around in the wings, And I suspect that sometime August, September, thereabouts, we're going to see Biden graciously bow out and say, you know what, I want to, the old line, I want to spend time with the family of grift. so we'll see how that plays out. But I can tell you they are getting very nervous about Biden, and nervous they should be, because the guy is absolutely, he's incompetent, but beyond incompetent, I'm tired of some of these pundits saying he's just so stupid. He's not stupid. He may be cognitively gone, but he knows who butters his bread. He knows where the grift comes from. So this isn't by mistake that he's making these silly calls regarding green energy and everything else that tends to benefit China. That's not mistake. That's what China paid for. And he's doing his best to accommodate his Chinese masters. So the Dems are starting to get nervous, and nervous they should be. Hey, do you have a suggestion for a possible guest or a topic that you'd like to hear on TNT Radio? Perhaps you say, hey, you guys talk about this a lot, but you don't talk about that a lot. Well, then we want to hear from you. Simply complete the suggestion form on the TNT Radio website. That would be tntradio.live. And we'll see if we can get it on for you. Help us make a difference at TNT Radio.
The latest headlines waiting for you.
I follow the news pretty much throughout the day.
Today's News Talk Radio, TNT.
All right. Well, it's time to bring my man Adam Clark into the mix here. The 74th NATO summit kicks off today in Vilnius, Lithuania. And those gathering together for this big monumental event not only include the usual handful of powerful world leaders, but this year we'll also see special appearances made by the dementia-ridden, cognitively gone patient that represents the United States of America, as well as a former B-rate comedian turned fundraising grifter representing Ukraine. I think you can guess who both of those are, but if you have any trouble, joining us now, TNT Radio News producer Adam Clark, a.k.a. Ruckus. Ruckus, it has the makings of an SNL skit, but here we are. What's the story, brother?
That's what I was thinking, because, I'm not 100% sure Zelensky was originally intending on showing up, but he heard that he might not be the talk of the town, so he's like, I better make sure I'm there and everybody's talking about me. Apparently...
Telling his subordinates, press my camouflage trousers.
Yeah, the guy's getting pretty ridiculous. Maybe we'll get into that. Let's see. Apparently, Biden is going to actually hold a one-on-one meeting with Zelensky during this week's NATO summit as a demonstration of unity amid disagreements over the Western military alliance's proposed security commitments to Kyiv. Multiple U.S. media outlets are reporting that the talks will be held on Wednesday on the sidelines of the NATO gathering, of course, all citing unnamed White House officials. CNN mostly saying the meeting will mark a sign of unity, as Zelensky's attendance at the summit had been in question. So what the heck is going on? Well, by now, we all know that there were some interesting things that Biden said on Sunday in an interview on CNN. And I believe one of the things was that he reiterated and or made it clear that NATO membership for Ukraine should remain off the table until the war ends, which is a smart thing. I mean, anyone with that, even this guy understands, if you immediately sign up Ukraine, we immediately go to World War III. But apparently, Zelensky's not happy with that decision, I think. But Biden said in the interview to CNN, quote, for example, what did he say? Let's see. During a taped interview that aired Sunday, quote, I don't think there is unanimity in NATO about whether or not to bring Ukraine into the NATO family now at this moment in the middle of a war. For example, if you did that, then and I mean what I say, we're determined to commit every inch of territory that is NATO territory. It's a commitment that we've all made no matter what. If the war is going on, then we're all in war. We're at war with Russia, if that were the case, end quote. Well, that statement appeared to unsettle Zelensky so much that he decided to attend the summit personally. He will arrive on Wednesday, a day after things have gotten underway, so he can meet with NATO leaders and seek a clear path to join the alliance, according to Bloomberg. Now, why wasn't he originally going to go? I love this part. So media reports had suggested earlier he might not attend. Zelensky's office still has not confirmed, apparently, all reportedly because NATO members had not made clear what was being promised to support Kyiv in his conflict with Russia. Zelensky has said it would be pointless for him to attend the meeting unless NATO were to provide a clear roadmap for Kyiv's accession to the U.S.-led military bloc. And I caught something from, who did this one? AFP, where they started their article today about this as a frustrated President Volodymyr Zelensky launched a furious broadside against Ukraine's NATO allies Tuesday. So, he said they reported Zelensky is denouncing it as "quote unquote" absurd, the reluctance of some NATO leaders to provide a clear timetable for Ukraine to join the alliance. So, yeah, that's where we're at. It's all kind of funny. I imagine Zelensky's going to do some more demanding. He did that recently with somebody, I forgot who it was, where he's like, "Hey, we appreciate the offer, but we need more." This guy's nuts. What do you think?
Yeah. Well, I think that look, they sign on to NATO if they're granted a partnership into NATO. Every signatory on that charter is immediately at war with Russia, as you mentioned. It's absurd. So Biden takes the back door out and says, we're not quite ready yet, but hang on to your wallets because we're about to stuff them with our cabbage. We're about to give you all kinds of cash. We're going to give you, the M1A1 Abrams tanks were promised back in January. They still haven't rolled off the docks yet. So they can say whatever they want, but they're funding this proxy war. And I think that the more and more I look at it, as I said yesterday, Ruckus, there's more to this war than the American people are being told. And, it is possible that there's not a good guy here. I'm no Putin apologist, but Russia does have a point here that we're not being told about. And Ukraine is not necessarily the best ally in the world either. I mean, good God, it was the most corrupt country of the former Soviet bloc nations. It would not be a stretch to say the most corrupt country in all of Europe. And I just want to know a lot more before everybody's trying to get into NATO now, which means, they're rushing. They're putting the pressing on the accelerator for World War III. The whole thing is absurd, and I'm scared of it. But at least Biden is saying no NATO membership, but we'll continue to fund the proxy war. What else is there to be said, really? That's what's going on.
Well, we're too far in now. We can't quit, right? We've invested $196 billion. Germany right behind us at $172 billion. I would love to see somebody add up all of the amounts of money that all the countries have sent Zelensky. It's probably more money than exists.
Yeah, well, I'm sure. And not only that, but I'm sure that a lot of that money is being washed and sent back to to people on the grift. I'm not making any suggestions, but I just wouldn't be at all shocked to learn that, given the fact that, they were making so much money out of Burisma and all other different groups within Ukraine, but whatever. Anyway, interesting. It's going to be, did you see the way that King Charles was having to basically walk Biden around when he was inspecting the troops? It was absolutely stunning. It's an embarrassment to our nation that this man is our president, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, Biden was a little wobbly, too. I was concerned. I thought he was going to fall over.
I know. It's absolutely crazy. Anyway, Ruckus, I thank you very much, my friend. And I'm off tomorrow because I'm heading to Memphis. But I will chat with you live from Memphis on Thursday. And I'm looking forward to that, my friend.
Spectacular. Me as well.
We're going to the Freedom Fest, baby.
Yeah.
Thank you,
I think
my
you're going to be out there with Timothy Shea and Brian McLean, as well as some other folks from TNT. So have a safe
Timothy
trip,
and Hesh are going to be there. Yeah, we will. Thank you so much, my friend. We'll talk to you soon, brother. All right, there he goes. That's Ruckus. You're listening to the Steve Hook Show on TNT Radio. Now stick around because coming up, we've got a fabulous guest. I cannot wait to talk to John Vecchione. He is going to talk all about the government's insistence that they should be able to restrict speech on their whim. That's right. We'll talk about Judge Doughty. We'll talk about the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. They're trying to get the injunction lifted. We'll talk to John about that in mere moments on TNT Radio.
Mark Morano on TNT Radio.
If I were an African leader,
of any of these poor countries, I would absolutely choose China's alliance over Western alliance with Europe and the United States. You might say, why would you do that? These are communists. These are people with civil rights and slaves and they're bottom line is the United States comes in and we've sent Kamala Harris to Africa. We've sent our Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen to Africa, and they literally tell them and praise them for living a primitive existence, for living without enough running water, electricity. They're doing it right. The West is offering deprivation, managed control of their economy, energy limits, only renewables. They're not allowed to make the same mistakes. And meanwhile, China's offering jobs, infrastructure, hospitals, roads, running water, electricity, and you'll be in debt to China, and they're going to end up owning you and ultimately enslaving you. But in terms of a easy buy right now, it's a much more compelling offer from China than anyone in the West.
The Mark Morano Show on today's News Talk Radio, TNT. A better business tip from TNT Radio. The benefits of advertising on today's News Talk, TNT Radio, should be clear to businesses of any shape or size. It can be accessed anywhere, anytime, by anybody, and is the perfect way to build brand awareness and stimulate digital activity. If you'd like more information about advertising on TNT Radio, simply fill out your details on our contact page and we'll be in touch. To find out more, go to tntradio.live. You're listening to The Steve Hook Show on today's News Talk, TNT Radio.
All right, welcome back to The Steve Hook Show on TNT Radio. And again, I'm just absolutely thrilled to be joined by our next guest. First time on the program, John Vecchione. John is, like I said in the lead up, John is what the ACLU used to be. He is a civil libertarian. He's the senior litigation counsel for the New Civil Liberties Alliance. And he joins me now. John, hello, sir. How are you? Welcome to the program.
Good to be here, and I'm doing fine.
Good. Well, I'm glad to have you because I want to talk about and I know that this is kind of your wheelhouse here. This is what you're pressing on. On July 4th of all days, Judge Terry Doughty, a district court judge in Louisiana, basically told the federal government, hey, hands off of social media. You don't get a right to do this. He even went so far as to say this is very reminiscent of Orwellian Ministry of Truth stuff. And then, as if by some kind of weird, I don't, what's going on with the left today is very strange to me, John, because once upon a time, the left was advocates of civil liberties. I mean, I remember the chants, and you do too, power to the people, down with the man. Now that they've become the man, they have kind of turned a 180 on this. And everyone from newscasters to punditry to, of course, higher ups in the DNC and federal agencies are saying, no, we must have this power. So they've moved this to the Fifth Circuit. Why don't you kind of fill us in and enlighten us on what you think is going on here? I think we kind of intuitively know, but I'd like to get your take on it.
Well, you mentioned that. I always think of a free speech movement at Berkeley, and you couldn't get one of those nowadays, right? So it's basically let me tell you what's going on in this case. As you mentioned, the opinion came out on July 4th. It's 155 pages, way too much to go into here, but it's a preliminary injunction. The judge, since this case is filed, I represent 4 individual plaintiffs, 3 doctors and a woman in Louisiana who's very concerned about the state taking over children's health care. And all these people were thrown off of Twitter, thrown off of Facebook for saying things that now we would say were true. But the states of Missouri and Louisiana had brought the case already. And we joined, and we've been pressing this to say, look, we've been hurt by this because these companies, we sometimes think that all these companies are run out of, San Francisco and high tech, and they just want to quell all these voices, regardless of what the government thinks. And that's been the government's pitch. Oh, they all wanted to do this. But they were all making money by how many eyeballs and how many people are engaged in their social media. They don't want to throw people off. And so what we found when the judge gave us some discovery to take the deposition of people like Fauci and the head of media engagement at the CDC was that they were intimidating and browbeating and coercing all of these social media companies, by constant refrains of, you got to get that off, you got to take this down, you can't have this kind of message on there. And so social media was being pushed and controlled by the government for the speech of hundreds of thousands, if not millions of Americans. And what Judge Doughty did on July 4th was to stop that. He said, you know what? If you know of a crime, if there's criminal activity going on these social media, you're allowed to go tell them. You're allowed to say, look, there's trafficking, there's somebody doing something wrong with the votes, there's some kind of foreign problem going on. You're allowed to do that. What you're not allowed to do is coerce and interfere with people's First Amendment protected speech. And his whole order says that. And yet the government's gone crazy and is making emergency motion after emergency motion to overturn it.
Yeah. And the thing that's really scary, and by the way, the preliminary injunction, we should mention, it blocks a number of Biden's top officials, and among them are Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas, Health and Human Services Secretary Xavier Becerra, Surgeon General Vivek Murthy, White House Press Secretary KJP, Karine Jean-Pierre. So they were pointing to specific people inside the administration. Of course, it was really the larger umbrella is the federal government. But the fact that they would point these people out, I mean, Mayorkas, what is Mayorkas trying to hide? I guess probably illegal immigration numbers. Xavier Becerra, this would be probably COVID stuff. All of this smacks of they're trying to massage their truth, to use their own parlance, their truth, and shut everyone's else real truth down, no?
That's exactly what's happening here. You know, I think that some of the testimony, they've also sued the census, but from what I've been able to tell, we've also sued the census, but what I've been able to tell is this all started back, the census had this program where they wanted to get their message out, right? About you should fill out your forms and you'll get federal representation, all that stuff. And there may have been, I don't know this, but there may have been some, don't put these messages on, but the testimony I was present at didn't have that. But what they take this, which is basically the government saying to social media, look, we have a message to get out, which the government's allowed to do. And then they completely weaponized it to, but other people have messages we don't like that we don't want getting out. And that's when they cross the First Amendment line. And they want to keep crossing it because otherwise this order, if you want to protect, as the federal government, if you want to protect people's First Amendment rights and not use your bullying and your threats to the social media companies to take people's First Amendment protected speech down, you don't need to appeal this order because it doesn't stop any of that.
Yeah. That's there's the rub, isn't it, John? There's the tell, to use a poker parlance. There's the tell. They're letting you know what they want. And I remember full well when Zuckerberg was on the Joe Rogan podcast, and he basically said, look, the FBI was in constant contact with us. They were telling us to pull this, pull that. I'm paraphrasing here, but he was basically laying it out. And Zuckerberg, of course, donated millions and millions and millions of dollars to the 2020 election. So it's not like he's a civil libertarian. He's probably interested in his own bottom line. But then, of course, the Twitter files come out and we learn all of this stuff. And now they are panic stricken. And I'm wondering, John Vecchione, as we speak to you about this, now that you are senior litigation counsel for the new Civil Liberties Alliance, I got to ask you this. What happened to the ACLU? Where are they on this? Why are they not standing with you guys arm in arm saying, you're damn right we're going to reel the federal government in? Where are they?
I really believe that this is the decline of the civil liberties movement in that respect, in that it depends whose ox is getting gored. I always use, let's say that there had been a conservative government censorship. They do all the same things. They contact Facebook, they contact Twitter, LinkedIn, everyone, and they threaten to take away their 230. Section 230 allows them not to be sued for things other people put on their websites, right? So they threaten to take this stuff away if they don't take down websites that tell illegal immigrants where to get help in America, right? What if they were doing that, or they were doing something that said, we don't like these birth control messages going out. We want those off social media. Do you think the ACLU or the New York Times or the Washington Post would be taking their position on these exact same government actions? No, they wouldn't.
Yeah.
Because it really depends whose ox is getting gored, not, hey, do we have First Amendment rights and are they being abridged? The Constitution says the government should not pass laws that abridge the freedom of speech. And this is clearly abridging it because we see all these messages being taken down and moved out of the new public square that is social media by government action, not by private action.
We're speaking with John Vecchione. He's the senior litigation counsel for the New Civil Liberties Alliance. And John, I just wanted to point out that what the argument on the other side of this is, and you'll hear this from people that are really, I'm not going to say they're stupid, but let's say they're willfully uninformed. And that is, they'll say, well, these are private companies. They can do what they want. Well, that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about government agencies and people inside the federal government coercing and pressuring these people to do everything you just said. And not only that, but Judge Doughty, in his ruling, he even said all of these go against conservative points of view. It seems that all of the censorship comes from the left shutting down the right, and that's coercion. It's blatant censorship. So the whole, these are private companies, that kind of goes right out the window because, as you mentioned in the open, these people make money off of everybody, not just Democrats or Republicans or liberals or progressives or conservatives. It has nothing to do with private industry deciding, does it?
Right. Well, you mentioned Zuck. He seemed very uncomfortable. I think that all these, and if you look at the internal emails that we unearthed, at all of these social media groups were very uncomfortable with this. They were uncomfortable with how often the government was calling them. They were uncomfortable with it, at the very least. So I don't think you can say the private entities really wanted it. It wasn't like they were calling the government and saying, hey, what messages do you want to be taken off? It wasn't that.
Right.
And so I think that there was that. And also the judge said these were conservative messages. Well, they're now considered conservative messages, but certainly vaccine hesitancy was always, when I was growing up, a leftist thing, right? It was not something, it was Marin County where people were always there who wouldn't get their kids vaccinated. It was not anywhere else. So although we now call it conservative, this goes to the point that it can be anybody's message. Just because it's associated with one side or the other, if the government doesn't like it, if Judge Doughty's order is overturned, they're allowed to do this to anybody, regardless of where the message is associated. And he pointed out in his order, he said, listen, these are all messages associated with conservatives, but it could just easily be anybody if you give the government this weapon.
Yeah, because the pendulum always swings back, and one of these days, and hopefully not too long, we will have a more conservative president, and then all of a sudden, turnabout's fair play. Now, I'm just amazed by this as I looked at Doughty's.
It won't be for the New Civil Liberties Alliance. We'll sue them too. But go ahead.
Oh, good for you. Here. I agree. And I'm certainly not trying to advocate on behalf of any government, regardless of their ideology, having this kind of power. But I'm reminded, John, that it was. Let me see. Trump-Russia collusion, that was stifled. Hunter laptop, that was absolutely stifled. Any talk of COVID, whether it was vaccine hesitancy or origin or stifled. So everything they stifled was to keep people in the dark. And that's what frightens me so much. It wasn't, these people are trying to push a conservative message, as you so rightly point out. It's these people are trying to give you information that you may not heretofore have heard because, well, good God, the media is not going to report anything about the Hunter Biden laptop. The media is not going to say that they got it wrong on COVID because they're in the tank. But this could be anyone's message that the government all of a sudden feels that they're not comfortable with. How do they get away with that Is it just because it's the internet? They feel like, oh well, it's the Wild West, and we can reel it in whenever we want. In other words, what's their motivation here besides keeping stuff quiet? I mean, how do they justify it? Is what I'm saying.
Well, I think the way it started, I don't know if you saw Matt Taibbi talk to when he was in front of
testimony.
Congress. He said something, and I'm not. I tend to be a big national security guy, but I think that he's right. He said, "Listen, a lot of this stuff started with national security. People would call up and say, well, this is a message. This is a foreign message. Well, then they started saying that, Americans saying things that some foreign group might say they were foreign, right? And that's not the way it works. So I think that it started that way, but I also think that because COVID caused such a panic, and the government found that the social network crowd was willing to listen to them, and then the social network crowd was afraid because everyone was mad at them that they could intimidate and coerce the social network crowd. They found they had this power, and then it just kept expanding into new different areas. It's the one thing that absolutely floors me is that there is if the law requires all the pharmaceutical companies that they have known side effects, they've got to put them on the label so you can read the label of what are the known side effects are on any FDA approved drug. But for Twitter and Facebook, if somebody posted the known side effects of the vaccines that the government requires them to put on the label, that would start being vax hesitancy or misinformation or disinformation, and that could be downgraded. It's crazy. Absolutely true things that even the government, one of my clients in another case, he was downgraded for linking to the National Institutes of Health and highlighting something they'd said that was true that they had put on there, but that they didn't want highlighted. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah, it is. It's absolutely, it's not government oversight. It's government complete control at this point. And I think that Americans have got to be a little bit more circumspect about what they're trying to do here. And the problem, John, that as I see it, is that this nation has become so divided, and I would argue intentionally divided, that you've got damn near 50% of the country saying, what the hell was this judge thinking? God, now there's going to be all kinds of crap about how great Trump is, or whatever it may be that they're concerned about. They just completely gloss over. This is fundamentally wrong on every level. It goes against who we are as Americans. And I don't understand when the left lost sight of that. And that's why I asked you specifically, where the hell is the ACLU? And I think you're right. It does depend on whose ox is getting gored. But that would mean that the ACLU is a bunch of damned hypocrites, is what it means.
I would say on this that maybe they did join one of our cases out in Cali when Newsom was telling the doctors what they couldn't say with patients. So I have to. They did get put in a brief for us there, but on this one they've been absolutely silent.
Yeah, they've been absolutely silent because this involves more than just COVID. Now the feds have decided they're going to move this to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals in Louisiana, and they're going to try and get this injunction stayed or just overturned outright. You are obviously, as the senior litigation counsel for the New Civil Liberties Alliance, you're obviously taking this up. What do you suspect the Fifth Circuit is going to say, or what are you hoping they're going to say? How do you think this is going to play out?
Yeah, let me fill in the gap there because you'd asked me and I didn't tell you. So the first thing the government did after this preliminary injunction came in is they moved to have that stayed, so that while they first, the next day on July 5th, they appealed to the Fifth Circuit, but that doesn't do anything. That just files an appeal. So they moved, as you have to do, before the district court and said, look, stay your injunction because it's going to cause us all kinds of problems if you don't stay it. And we opposed it, and we filed on Sunday. We and the states were working on it all over the weekend. We filed on Sunday. And then the judge came out and said, I'm not going to stay it. These people are still being hurt. And he explained all the things they were allowed to do to protect national security and stop, any kind of criminality that was happening. They can still do all those things. And so he says, no, I'm not going to do it because these people are still being hurt and you're not being hurt because you're not supposed to be violating the First Amendment anyway. So
exactly right.
He denied it. And so then they immediately, they have now moved for stay in the Fifth Circuit. And I think we have 10 days. It might be 14, but in any event, I don't have the rules in front of me. But the fact is, the Fifth Circuit could order us to respond quickly. But our view of it as the plaintiffs and now I guess the appellees in the Fifth Circuit is we think that Judge Doughty has explained his reasons. They're absolutely clear that the government can't show any harm. What are they going to say? Oh, no. Can they show one message that's bad, that they want taken down, that's illegal, that they can't take down because of this order? No. Anything that's illegal, if someone's out there defrauding, the Nigerian princes, right? The Nigerian princes send you something and they say, send me $500 and I can release the 10,000 of my wealth to you once I've gotten my right documents, right? Well, that's a fraudulent crime. Do you think the federal government can't call and tell the folks, listen, we're going to prosecute this crime. If you don't want to be a part of it, you better take that down because here is the U.S., 18 U.S.C. such and such, which is fraud. That's the crime. They specifically say the crime. They specifically tell them that's allowed by the order. Everybody would want that, right? We don't want, click on this and all your bank accounts empty. They're allowed to take care of that problem. So what are they worried about? And if they can't articulate what the terrible message that they can't take down, that's not illegal to the Supreme Court, which is, to the Fifth Circuit, then they're not going to get it. So I really think that this should hold up. I think that the judge has done his homework. He didn't just shoot from the hip here. He let us get some discovery. 6 months, and then he gathered all that information in 100, and you can go to nclalegal.org and you can read the whole memorandum if you like. You can read his order. They're all up there. And his order's just 8 pages long. And if anyone can read that and think that it stops the government from taking care of crime or, foreign interference with our elections or anything like that, which he specifically says they can do, then I don't know how they're harmed because he just says you can't stop or downgrade First Amendment protected speech. Seems a no-brainer to me.
Well, John, they're harmed because they can't get their message and only their message out. I will tell you just anecdotally, I was yanked off Twitter and I very, very rarely ever tweeted, if ever. I might share a few retweets and all that, but I'm convinced that the reason that they took me off was because all those years ago, about 3 years ago now, I had Stop the Steal, hashtag Stop the Steal in my bio. Bam, it was gone. I was taken out. I was like, this account has been permanently suspended. Now, of course, since Musk has taken over, I'm back up and operating. Again, I rarely, if ever, tweet. But the point is this is what they're doing. And Judge Doughty saw that, obviously. You obviously saw it. And the folks at the New American Civil Liberties Alliance obviously saw it. I'm just curious as to, let me just ask you this. Is this their last best hope, the Fifth Circuit? Because if this ever makes its way up to SCOTUS, it's going to come down 6-3 and they're going to lose, don't you think?
I think it may be worse than that. I got to tell you, the Supreme Court has been there have been a lot of 9-0 First Amendment stuff out of that court. That once the argument that I just made to you that anyone's ox could be gored, I think you could definitely see Kagan on the other side. I mean, the fact is that they're not going to like this because and certainly, do you remember the CDC when the CDC said that it could stop evictions in state courts and it went up to the Supreme Court and that order had been stayed and the court gave them a pass for a little while and then finally put the kibosh on it. This is in the injunctive area. So I don't think the court's going to overturn any injunctions. They're going to wait for it to come up. Even if the government has a good point, they're going to have to wait because I think that the court has really bulletproofed its order. It'll go up to the Fifth. If there's any minor problem, the Fifth will maybe adjust it this way or that way. But the facts are going to be the facts. And if the government then wants to take it to the Supreme Court, the facts are still going to be the facts. And the facts, they don't make up new facts in the Supreme Court. They're not allowed to do that. And the facts are driving this case, and the facts are bad for the government.
Yeah, and it seems to me that when I say 6-3, I think that would be a best case scenario. But I agree with you. I think that even some of the liberals on the court will say, "Wait a damn minute, there's nothing in here that protect the government's right to just." It's so blatant, though, John. Is this? I know that you are doing God's work here in trying to litigate this and joining the Missouri and Louisiana on this case. But what shocks me is the outright blatantness of it. It seems to me that they don't give a rip. They're just going to go full speed ahead, crush civil liberties without even giving it a second thought. Does that stun you as much as it stuns me?
It does. I will say this. It stuns me less than since I started doing this. But yeah, it does. It does stun me that they're so blatant about it, because you'd think they'd say, okay, this order has been up since July 4th, and look at all the bad things that happened. All the bad things we were unable to stop because of this order. Where are they? Have you been on the internet? Are there Nigerian princes getting away with murder? What the heck's going on? There's not bad things happening.
Yeah, and this is a thing that, and I'm glad you pointed this out. The federal government can still contact Zuckerberg. They can still contact Elon Musk. They can still contact all of these things if there is a direct violation of law. If somebody goes on Twitter and says, I want to take out so-and-so member of Congress, well, that's a direct violation of law. But to hear the punditry on the left talk about it, this is basically giving free rein to every conspiracy theorist spreading false information. Well, guess what? They've been able to do that for years, and they're just trying to get a hold of it on social media, it seems. Go ahead.
Well, also, the fact of the matter is, if the conspiracy theory isn't a crime, right? If I go on social media and I say the NFL is jacking up prices for this reason or that reason, or that the NFL is fixed because I lost the last bet I had, and that 3-pointer that was made from 60 yards out was obviously a fake, and that's a conspiracy theory, right? And you see this in sports all the time. Well, you're even allowed to say untrue things in America as long as no one's going to rely on them and you're not making money off of it, right? So the whole idea of they're trying to get rid of conspiracy theories, well, the government doesn't get to do that. The only way they get to do that is saying, here's why the conspiracy theory is wrong. It's wrong because of this, this, and this. That's what they're allowed to do, not you gotta shut up.
Well, exactly right. Now, how do you think it is that they feel that they can get away with it with social media more say than any other public platform? Why do you think? Is it because of Section 230? Is it because they've got this Damocles sword hanging over these people's heads that says we can pressure them because they fear what we will do to them if they don't comply? I mean, what do you think the motivation is there to keep going after these big social media companies?
I think the first is the reach. The newspapers and the other media, their reach has diminished. So I think part of it is reach. And I think the other part of it is 230. They have something. You can't take away a newspaper's protections, right? But you can take protections away from the social media. So I do think that is a big part of it. I also think that they, it's not like the big networks aren't kind of in their camp on a lot of these issues. So they don't have to call up the big networks to have them not say things about the vaccines or anything. So I do think it's the reach and the fact that they can threaten them with this 230. And also, some of these companies are new. They're all less than 20 years old, right? They're it's not like they have a lot of experience with this the way some of the old media does, which is they now know they've had all these fights, right? So I do think that that's another reason. But I will say this type of order will stiffen the spines of these companies, as I think. One of the other things that happen is that now I think a little courage can be injected into the system if there are people like Musk who want to resist, Zuckerberg who may not want to fully resist, but he doesn't want to do everything. He didn't become a multi-billionaire so he can be at someone else's beck and call. So
Right.
I think that this hopefully will put a little stiffening in the spine for people who do want to say no.
And John, it seems to me like we're talking about social media like they're being threatened, but in reality, if you really were to cook this down, we understand what's going on here. This isn't Facebook being stifled. This isn't Twitter being stifled. This is the American public being stifled. This is the public in general being stifled. And they figure the best way to do it is through social media. And I think that you've hit on something. It's because they're new to the game. They're not, while some of them are completely in the tank with this administration, no question about that. They also don't really quite know how it works because of this threat of 230 being ripped up. But it's really not the big multi-billion-dollar corporations that you're litigating for. It's the common man and woman. Am I right?
I want to add to that. So we did not sue the social media companies, but we did subpoena them for this information. And they have the ability to resist the subpoenas, and we didn't get in a fight over it. They gave us the information we thought we needed, and but they weren't bystanders. They gave us the material we asked for in subpoenas, and there was negotiations. I don't want to say it was easy peasy, but the fact is that they weren't the target of this. The government was, and they weren't. They certainly didn't go to court and say we're not going to give you this stuff at all ever.
Yeah.
So they did, but you're right. Their speech wasn't stifled. The people who were stifled are the people who wanted to get on and tweet something out, and it was immediately destroyed, or Facebook blocked you, or whatever else happens on all the social media sites. So, in any event, you're absolutely right. The people were stifled, not the big social networks. But again, my main thing is I really hate reading all these things where, well, they're private entities, they get to do this. Well, yeah, I suppose if the government hadn't done anything and they throw you off their site because one of the things we have here is the government kept calling them up and telling them how their user agreement meant this, that, or the other thing. And they'd say, no, it didn't. And then the government would tell them that we know better what their user agreement says than they did. Is that true? No, it was the government coercing them.
Yeah, exactly right. And that's what's so, I'll just give you an example, John. I had Dr. Peter McCullough on my program last week. I had Dr. Shankara Chetty on my program. These doctors were putting some inconvenient truths about the vaccine and about the origins of COVID and all this. They were immediately shut down. Of course, we know about Dr. Jay Bhattacharya. He was shut down.
He's a client.
And that's is he a client? Good. I'm happy to hear that.
He's one of the individuals who's protected by this order.
Yeah, well, and he's a brilliant doctor, and not only is he a brilliant doctor, but he's a brilliant thinker. All of these men that I just mentioned are brilliant thinkers, and they're thinking that, hey, wait a minute now, we need to get some truths out that social media would be the perfect vehicle for this, because as you mentioned, the reach. And then the reach of the government came into play and shut all these guys up. It's so un-American that it's sickening.
And the thing is, that's the other thing. As I just said, you're allowed to say things that may be wrong or untrue in America. That's the point. But Jay and his people, Aaron Carity, all my clients, they were saying true things. They were saying this is how you deal with respiratory viruses. You protect the most vulnerable people. They went through the whole thing, and they were right, and the CDC was wrong. And we shut down the whole country for way longer. It's not like they said, they remember, 2 weeks to stop the spread. But even so, even 30 days, right? Let's see what's going on. But they kept it up for 2 years. And and then they used that time to intimidate the social media so that everyone who could tell why the government was doing the wrong thing for the country weren't allowed to have, I'll say it, their social media go viral. Because they couldn't stop the virus, but they certainly stopped the free speech getting to everyone who wanted to hear it.
I tell you, in years down the road, when historians look back on this era, they're gonna be shocked. You're gonna be held up as a hero. So will the New Civil Liberties Alliance. They'll be held up as heroes. These guys stood up and did what's right. but I just am still. What staggers me is not the fact that power-craving politicians would try and use this power. That doesn't shock me. What shocks me is the fact that half the country seems to support that notion. And it seems to me on a larger scale, we have lost our idea of what Americanism and what freedom and what individual liberty is really all about.
Yeah, free speech is under attack. I think it started in the colleges. I really do. And this idea that free speech harms you when you disagree with it, or that it can somehow hurt you in some way. I just can't even believe that. But that thought started in the colleges and has moved through all of our institutions from that little that starting point in academia.
And the funny thing is, John, and we've only got a couple of minutes here, but maybe about a minute. But the funny thing is you mentioned Berkeley right at the top. Those same people are now trying to stifle people. It really is staggering.
It is.
Yeah. Well, John Vecchione, thank you so much for joining us. I hope we can have you back and discuss this further as the Fifth Circuit Court makes its ruling. John, it's the New Alliance for Civil Liberties.org. Is that it?
New Civil Liberties, NCLA legal.org.
Okay. God bless you, sir. Thank you. Have a wonderful day. Let's hope to have you back on again and enjoy your day. Thanks.
You too.
All right. Coming up on TNT, it's the Patrick Henningsen Show until, Thursday, because I'm off tomorrow. I'm Steve Hook on TNT Radio. Goodbye.